So, dear class, let's have a look at the world's most famous utterance, to be or not to be. The first thing about it is that nobody's absolutely clear where it should come in the play, between which scenes, at what stage, and anyone who tells you otherwise is wishful thinking, because nobody really knows, and often productions find it more appropriate to put it in a different place from each other. And what can there possibly be that would make sense of, in so important a play, such an important juncture where the main character actually thinks maybe he won't go on, maybe he'll do away with himself, and yet you don't know where to put it in the plot? What on earth does that say about the plot of a play or about the monologue itself? Let's see it as we look closer. To be or not to be. And so often you see stage productions, the Hamlet figure dressed all in black with a nice white collar, with a dagger at his knee, up on the precipice on the top, the very topmost part of the castle, which is an important place in the castle of Elsinore and in the play, where it is the very spot where Hamlet sees the ghost of his father, and there is always the threat of jumping off or falling in, and that creates, as do all precipices, a sense of to be or not to be. So that here he is saying it for us. It's difficult to translate because in English you have this lovely, it's actually an iambic cadence, to be or not to be. You wouldn't necessarily want to say it like that, but it is iambic. It retains the meter of English verse, conveniently, for 6 monosyllables to do that. So I think almost everybody knows to be or not to be. That is the question. And it kind of is the question throughout the world. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind, that's how people say it, to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. Actually, that's a complete misreading, but you'll hear it every time. The way the line is meant to be said is, whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles. So either keep it in the mind or fight it out. And by opposing, end them. The assumption is that if you do take arms, you will bring the conflict to an end. And so the worst thing that could happen if you've taken arms is that you lose the battle. And so he goes on to die, to sleep no more. And by a sleep, to say we end the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. You can't help wanting to be relieved of the torments of living. To die, to sleep. He repeats it, exactly the same formula. And now it comes to him to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. That's the problem. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. Our respect for death, it makes long life a calamity because we're endlessly putting off the dreams, the bad dreams that the sleep of death might contain. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, his contempt, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, officials and their insolence, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes, when he himself might his quietus make his end, achieve his ultimate quiet with a bare bodkin. Bodkin is a dagger, such as a prince might carry about his person, such as he might be able to show us now when he utters this speech. Who would fardels bear these burdens, to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveller returns, puzzles the will, and rather makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. Better the devil you know. Thus, bad reading. Thus conscience doth make cowards of us all. And by conscience he means not a bad conscience, he means consciousness, awareness, the awareness that death might be bringing something worse than life. It does make cowards of us all. And thus, the native hue of resolution, it's an interesting idea that we are born naturally to act, not to lie around thinking and worrying. The native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought. It's our resolution becomes disease, and it has a mantle, sickling it, making it sick-looking. And enterprises of great pitch and moment, or great pith and moment, you sometimes see it written, important enterprises, with this regard, their current turn awry and lose the name of action. So the will is puzzled by the problem of why are we still alive? Why? What is it that we think we're going to get by continuing to live? Now, it may not be surprising altogether that this speech has absolutely nothing to do in particular with Hamlet's own situation. All my life it has amazed me, and when you point it out to people, their jaw drops, that in this speech, Hamlet says the most idiotic and contradictory things. He says, death, that barrier that once you passed it, no one ever comes back to tell you about it. But this man, Hamlet, uttering these famous words, has just met somebody who has just come back from death, his father. So why does no one ever stand up in the audience and say, "Oi, excuse me, Prince, just 1 minute. You actually met someone who came back from that undiscovered bourne from which no traveller returns. He was up there on the battlements with you, talking to you. So why are you telling me no one ever meets anyone from the afterlife?" But of course, to me this is not absurd, but not astonishing. Astonishing that no one really notices, if you like. But not astonishing that this contradiction exists, because nothing about this speech suggests that it's really written to be spoken by Hamlet. It's written to be spoken by every man, by anyone. The situation doesn't apply to Hamlet. He's not suffering the law's delays, or the ordinary man maybe. But he doesn't suffer any delay from the law, because he is the law. He's the prince. He's going to be the king. He's not suffering. He's not staggering under the fardels that other people have to bear. He's not having to deal with the insolence of office, of officials being insolent to him, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes of the unworthy are taking the opportunity to be unpleasant to the worthy, to patient merit. None of this describes Hamlet at all. It has nothing to do with Hamlet's situation, but it has to do, if you like, with everybody's situation, and makes a more perceptive, I think, reader than you normally get for Shakespeare, and particularly the speech by which everybody is awed. My God, he's asking the question, to be or not to be. Who would want to go on living, suffering all the harsh circumstances that living involves? They don't think, well, on the other hand, maybe if you were a prince, you wouldn't have very many harsh circumstances to endure. The play is full of monologues by Hamlet in which he addresses the reality of his situation, which is, I better get on and kill my uncle. There's no mention of that. This is a speech in which there is no uncle to kill. There is no father to be avenged. There's no mother who's behaving bizarrely. There's no lover who he's suspicious of because now he's suspicious of all women. None of that occurs. There's not a single, even the tiniest a moment in this long soliloquy, the most famous delivered by any character in a play, that is delivered here by Hamlet, not once the slightest, tiniest instance that anchors it to Hamlet the character. And what's most interesting is not that nobody ever seems to notice this, although that's quite interesting. What's really important is that nobody cares. They don't mind. At any point in this play, or any other play, the character could come in and say, why don't we kill ourselves? We don't then need it to be anchored to the situation, because taking yourself out of the game, which is what Hamlet is talking about, out of the situation, makes the situation irrelevant. There's no point in his coming in and saying, well, I've got all this problem with my uncle. I think he may have killed my father, but I don't really know. Should I kill myself? This makes no sense. No, you shouldn't. You should go kill your uncle. But any character in any situation, in any play, in any story, can appear on stage and say, do you know, to be or not to be, that's the only question that matters. Because why should we go on putting up with the shit, pardon my French, of life, when we could just end it? You know, give our hand back, leave the game. And then he answers his own question by saying, yeah, but we don't really know what actually leaving the game means, because when we get to the other side of death, who knows? It could be far more horrible than living. And unfortunately, we have nobody to tell us what it actually is like over there. And then at that moment, of course, nobody in the audience stands up and says, hold on a second, Prince, you know exactly what the other side is like, because your father has just been on stage describing it to you. Nobody cares. Nobody cares, because it's not just that we don't care really all that much about the play, because we don't really care all that much about any play, or any action, or any story. Not as much as we do care about the great existential questions that the story may raise up to us. And this is the greatest of all. Why go on? Why not stop? Why not return our cards? Why not just leave the tables? And it's a good question. And Shakespeare provides an even better answer, which is, could be worse, darling, when you get to the other side. So, having said that, it's, yeah, okay, right, fair enough, got to go on. And whatever the next scene is, hush, soft, the fair Ophelia is often where it's placed, where Ophelia comes on, oh my goodness, it's Ophelia. Oh, look, she's got her prayer book in her hands, and he says to her, please remember me in your prayers. And he's forgotten that moment that is sempiternal. It's the moment in everybody's life. Every moment is the moment of to be or not to be. And what is so brilliantly successful is that in this play, it has nothing to do with the character who speaks it. Absolutely nothing. The chores, the tedium of life, the humiliations of life that he describes are not humiliations that a prince actually has to endure. But we do. So Hamlet speaks to us as Mr. Everyman Hamlet, Mr. Loving the People Hamlet. That works. He's not an arrogant swine. He's concerned with people's problems. But now when he considers the question of to be or not to be, he's considering it on behalf of all mankind. Why would anyone go on with their tedious life, with its horrible chores, when they could get out? They could leave. And then he says, or not. Because the other game, the one on the other side of death, we don't know what that's like. Actually, Shakespeare apparently does. And Hamlet does too. Because when his daddy comes back to say, I'm only allowed a certain amount of time, I'm living this horrible torture because I failed to do my confessions before I died, because I was killed, didn't have a chance to get myself ready, which would in ways that would have taken me to a happier place. And now I'm in a horrible place, even though, interestingly, that horrible place doesn't describe anything that makes sense within or without of Christianity. It doesn't make any sense at all. But it's not nice. It's not nice at all. So if it's Hamlet thinking, should I leave the game now? Not if my daddy was telling me about what it's like on the other side, unless perhaps if I confess, because this play, curiously, is the most Christian play that Shakespeare ever wrote. He doesn't appear to be a Christian at all, our beloved bard. He's a pagan, and the pagan gods of ancient England and the pagan gods of Rome are the afterlife, the cosmic world that he responds to and that he loves. And yet, in this play, angels and ministers of grace defend us, cries Hamlet at one point, very unlike any other hero in Shakespeare. So this play does have a rather strangely quasi-Christian background in terms of what the poor old king who didn't manage to make confession before he died because he was killed, the poor old king is now suffering in eternal flames and dungeon, horrible punishments. But that appears, according to the play, to be what happened to you if you don't confess in time. That's not a very profound philosophical judgment for whether life's worth going on. The answer, yeah, it's worth doing, yeah, as long as you remember to make sure that you make confession before you die. Don't fall under a bus. Don't get murdered, because you'll have missed your chance, and you'll wind up in hell. Now, if that's the case, there's a very stupid, dull truth behind to be or not to be, which is, well, if you get lucky, you'll be able to make your confession before you die, and then you'll be in heaven. But luck is not really what this speech should be about, if it's so famous, to be or not to be. What he's really saying is to be lucky or not to be lucky. That is the question. And actually, maybe in this life, that is the question. What do you think? Till later. Bye-bye.